Welcome to Go Beyond Disruption podcast, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. This week's episode is called September Reset, Reconnecting in a Crisis. I'm Scott Kellam, and I'm based in the AICPA office here in Durham, North Carolina. Every week we share insights from inside the accounting and finance profession to help you stay ahead of the curve, whatever business you're in. And we have Julie Holunga joining us. Hey, Julie, how are you?
Good. How are you, Scott?
Good. Hey, I'm going to give a little snippet of your bio, and then please add anything else that I missed. It says that you are a leadership trainer, speaker, and author. You help attorneys, CPAs, and female leaders influence with authority, and that you are the principal and executive coach at Chinook Executive Solutions, which is a Denver-based training and coaching firm, and that you serve mid-career attorneys, CPAs, and female business leaders. And you help them to reduce stress, manage their time, lead with confidence, and build their business. Anything else you might want to add to that?
Well, I just had some good news this week. I have been selected to speak at a Tedx Conference this fall, so I'm very excited about that.
Oh, that's awesome. Is that the first TEDx for you?
It is. It's fourth time is a charm. I have I've applied 4 times, and resilience.
Yeah, well, they had to see the light eventually, because those first 3 times you should have been in, quite honestly.
Right. Yes.
I guess that goes with the confidence part.
Exactly.
All right. So we the title of this episode is September Reset, Reconnecting in a Crisis. And I guess I wanted to share something to kind of kick it off from a statistics standpoint. This was from a employee recognition provider in the UK, and this was from June 2020. So it's definitely current. It says here that research suggests that 1/3, this is a British provider, it says 1/3 of British workers feel less connected to their workplace culture and colleagues due to the ongoing situation. 1/3. I mean, that's that's pretty substantial. I mean, are you seeing that across the board with everybody, or I mean, how do you feel about that?
It's interesting, Scott, because in I think once we all kind of got over that initial what's going on, what am I doing? I need my setup, I need my 2 monitors, and I need my standing desk and all of that from early spring. Once we got over that, I was hearing from clients, I don't know if we're going to go back to our physical office or we're going to reduce our space. So my attorney clients who deal in the real estate business were freaking out because their commercial real estate clients, were going to take a hit. And that was kind of a general theme that I was hearing. Wow, we're so productive at home. We can save our employees time of commuting, and we're able to connect, and we have Zoom, and we have Microsoft Teams, and all of these different softwares and products that allow us to keep connected. And I was hearing great examples of what people were doing. And now in the last couple of weeks, sort of in the, kind of starting in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I'm hearing more and more from clients that people are feeling disengaged, as you just said, that productivity has decreased significantly. A client of mine yesterday shared that he's able to see what people are billing, right? So he said that productivity is down by 50%. And it's not because the work isn't there. It's because people are just not where they were. And a lot of it has to do with an exhaustion that's going on. So we were joking around that now we're calling it, instead of Zoom fatigue, it's now working from home fatigue because of that lack of connection.
And it's across the board. I mean, no one's safe from this. I can't imagine, correct? I mean, it's got to hit everybody. Right.
Well, I'll say one point. I have one client. He's in the IT space, so a little bit different, but he has clients that he has to work with, customers. And when this all first happened, and when quarantine really came into effect, he said, I was born for social distancing. I was born for the quarantine. So he's fine. This is working fine with him. And yet, he told me yesterday that he realizes some of his team members are not doing well. And he's realized he needs to reach out to certain people once or twice a week, not under the guise of talking about work, but just checking in with them. And he says they end up talking about what restaurants they're ordering in from. They talk about what they're doing. I live in Colorado. People talk a lot about hiking and getting outdoors and mountain biking. And so he's realized that although it's not affecting him, it certainly is affecting people around him. And so even though he doesn't feel impacted by this, he has, thank goodness, the wherewithal to recognize it in others.
Which leads me to what I've been kind of dying to ask is how do you recognize the fact that, whether it be subtle or obvious, that people are having a tough time connecting?
This is brilliant. So hold on to your seat here. But you ask them. You check in with them. And one of the things that I've been seeing more and more and hearing from my clients is that leadership looks different right now than it did a year ago, than it did in February for us here in the U.S., certainly earlier elsewhere around the world. But the sense of leaders have always needed to demonstrate empathy and to be authentic. But it's needed so much more now. So don't ask me how I'm doing if you're not going to listen to my response.
Okay, so you asked me that. You're my line manager.
Yes.
Why would I feel comfortable just letting go?
Right. Well, that's a whole nother discussion if you don't feel comfortable. But the rationale and what I've been coaching people around is when you ask someone how they're doing, and that is a really difficult question. So sometimes I will say to people, let's be a little bit more specific. So for here in Colorado, our kids have just gone back to school. So people that I know who have kids, and especially if they're younger, I'll say, how's remote learning going for you? Or being sure that you know something about the person so you can ask a specific question. Because I know I hate receiving, hey, what's going on? I don't even know where to begin. So try to be specific. But in terms of if you don't have trust with your employees, that's a whole nother conversation we could have. But the goal is that in asking these open-ended questions, and I'll give you some examples, is that you're building trust. You're demonstrating empathy. So if you say to someone, hey, how's remote learning going for you? Or how is it, if you work with someone who tends to be on the road all the time, connecting with their customers or clients, and they're not right now, you could ask a question along the lines like, how are things going with XYZ client, given that you're not able to see them, or you're not able to see how their team is engaging, or you're not able to be on site and see how they're doing. What are you doing instead? And how is that impacting you? And that's a key question that I love to ask. What's the impact? You're not saying what's the impact of you not traveling, but what's the impact on you? And those last two words are so impactful because it demonstrates that empathy. It builds trust. And if you're truly listening and then following up with additional questions that demonstrate that you're listening, it really hits home for them. And it allows your employees or your customers or your clients or your vendors to feel that connection. So some other questions I like to ask, especially if someone's venting to you, okay. Which I'm on the receiving end a lot. I let them vent. And then after a couple of minutes, I'll say, okay, so what's the biggest challenge for you? Again, those last two words are so key. So
if we can arm folks with the right questions to ask and advise them strongly to ask authentically and listen for the answers, how do you do it remotely? I mean, I love walking to a room of strangers and just seeing what conversations are going to occur. I mean, but that's not happening. And just like that example you used as someone that's on the road, it's, I think we had talked once before about managing by walking, and that's just not possible. So how do you strategize that? Well,
I have been recommending to people, and I've learned this from some of my clients who are doing this, is still managing by walking, but you're doing it virtually. So I've been doing it for the last couple months where when people say, hey, let's connect, or if I'm feeling like I haven't touched base with someone for a while, I do it. I always do it at the end of my day. So I offer 4:00 and 4:30, and I'll reach out to people and say, let's go for a virtual walk. We get on the phone and we get outside. And it's amazing, both for me and for the other people, the movement, the being outside and the connecting. And most of the time, Scott, I find that the first 15 minutes is, what's going on for you? Like, how is this? Yesterday, I did it with a client. Like, how are you managing your team when you're, around the city and not seeing each other and haven't seen each other for months? So I love that. That has been really impactful. But the other recommendation I make is to ask people how they want to connect. So maybe you give them a couple of options. One of my clients yesterday, we were talking about this, and she came up with some ideas of, she lives and works downtown Denver. There's a beautiful park, Wash Park. And so she has been offering people, hey, do you want to go for a walk in the park? We'll keep our distance. I'll wear a mask if that is comfortable for you. Or we could have a picnic and keep our distance and be outside. But then she also offers a phone call or a Zoom call, or, she's trying to offer different options to people. She's not comfortable sitting at a restaurant, so that's why she's not offering that. She has been on the receiving end of that. But she said it's been really good just being able to offer people 3 different options of how to connect. Actually, one of my clients did it, and what they did, they're a regional firm, so they did it for their women. And so they connected all their women. I don't know how they did it, but they once a month you were connected with a different female person. It was randomly done. I know that they were trying to connect people who weren't on the same team. And it was that they would do that. So they would connect them and say, you have half an hour. It's only half an hour. There's no going over. You get outside and you get on the phone and you call each other. And so they were developing new relationships that way.
That's awesome and impactful. And I guess the reason I like the virtual walk is you're not distracted. You're not looking at your email down to the right-hand side. You're not taking notes. So it's truly, I don't know, lack of a better term, authentic way to connect. Exactly.
And you were saying, like, why should I give you everything or dump on you? It's a great way to develop that trust. And I know a couple of my clients have been discouraged with their leaders they can tell are doing something else, either because they're on Zoom and they can see their eyes moving because they're reading something, or they hear them. One of my clients was telling me every time she talks to her boss, she hears he's emptying the dishwasher, he's making coffee. I mean, he's doing everything but listening to her. So we had a good laugh. And I did ask her, I said, would you be okay if he was walking while you were talking? And she said, oh yeah, that would be great. So it's really understanding where people are, where their comfort level is, but also pay attention. We all know when we're distracted. So don't feel that you're fooling anyone.
Yeah, we were talking to a CFO that was repairing his lawnmower the other week. I was like, are you kidding me?
That's a good one. Scott, I'm going to use that one. That's impressive.
I didn't say that. That was a bubble above my head. I did not. I was very kind.
Yeah, well, that's good.
You had mentioned something before as far as people are concerned now because of, I guess, the brain is wired for certainty. You had said before. And obviously, as a manager, as a leader, you don't have a crystal ball, but how can you help people get over the lack of certainty? Not that you want to make promises you can't keep, but how can we approach that?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So, Scott, when we were talking before, we were talking about the uncertain times and that the brain wants predictability. And so when something is uncertain, when we don't know what's going to happen, our brain automatically goes into what we all talk about now being fight or flight mode. But uncertainty doesn't have to be something bad. Just because we don't know what's going to happen and our brain wants to go down that path of negativity, we can say to ourselves, we don't know what's going to happen, and let's assume it's going to be positive. And so this is something I have to practice myself. It's sort of, I have all kinds of sticky notes on my monitors of, just reminders, don't forecast, don't look more than a week in advance, these kinds of things, because our brain naturally wants to wants to know what's going to happen. And my girlfriend and I, 25 years ago, were traveling through Europe, and on the Eurail Pass. Any baby, Gen Xers out there know what the Eurail Pass is. But traveling around and missing trains and getting in the wrong place, and we used to play this game called Worst Case Scenario. Like, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen right now? And it's fun, but now at this point in life, with COVID going on, not a good game. I don't recommend it. But really paying attention to what is my natural reaction to all of this uncertainty. And then maybe saying to yourself, hey, what do I know for sure? So that's why I say to myself, like, don't look more than a week out, because there's so much unknown. But what I know is what's going to happen between now and a week from now.
So we know now that we need to connect with folks. We know that you need to ask questions that end with you.
Yes.
And then from the standpoint of mindset, we're trying to change other folks' mindset. But then can you touch more on how you did a little bit on the mindset of the manager or the senior executive that has that department? Is there anything else that they can do to stay up?
Yeah. It's such a good question. And I mean, this happens all the time. My client yesterday gave an example. She put an offer out to hire someone, great candidate, good fit culturally, great experience, and they thought for sure he was going to accept. And between the time that they had their last conversation and they offered him the job, his wife had been laid off. So all of a sudden, he has become more risk averse and doesn't want to be last man in, and therefore first man out. So we had a conversation. How do you say to someone, I can't promise you what's going to happen, but her rationale was, there's a ton of work to be done. And so we're not going to let you go because there's so much that needs to be done. Now, she said to me, I don't know what a year from now is going to look like. I don't know what 6 months is going to look like. But so what we had that conversation was to be honest and to be transparent and say, I can't promise you anything, but this is what I know. And so there's a level of transparency, but also being cognizant of what you can share and what you can't share. And what I always like to tell people is just be honest. I don't know what's going to happen, or I'm aware that there's some information that I can't share with you, but this is what I can share with you. When we don't acknowledge the elephant in the room of what we're not sharing, that just raises people's fear levels, because we're not saying, so sometimes I'll say to people, if you say, I would love to be able to say X, Y, and Z to you, but I don't know that for sure, or that decision hasn't been made, or I'm not even privy to that information yet.
But you put it out there that you're standing right next to them. You're not standing across from them.
Exactly. That's a great metaphor. Yeah.
That makes sense. And then we had talked about too the process that someone has to fix everything during this whole reconnecting. How does that play both positively and negatively, or how do you turn that off if it is a negative?
Right. So in normal times, there are many of us as leaders who struggle. Someone comes to us with an issue or a conflict and we want to fix it for them. Even more so now when we're disconnected, when we're not able to manage by walking, we're not able to do things that we normally do. It's even more important for us to recognize that it's not expected that we fix everything, and that we don't need to fix everything. And that if we can be more of a listener and act as a resource, that we will be better off, and that the people that we're talking to will be better off. So I often will share with people that when someone comes to vent to you, that again, you can ask that question, what's the biggest challenge for you? How can I be a resource for you? What is causing pain? What are the biggest pain points for you? Those kinds of questions. Because if you jump in and try to fix it, you are making them a victim, and you're making yourself like the savior, right? And then it is those people that tell me I have too much on my plate. I have too many meetings I'm supposed to be going to. I have too much Zoom fatigue. I have meetings all day long. Well, let's trust the people that are working with us, that they can solve that and they can figure that out. And if you think of yourself as a resource as opposed to the fix-it person, everyone is better off for it.
We talked about the signs of disconnecting and finding out. Just ask. You've given us some examples, some stories of how you've helped some clients with their challenges. If you could give people 3 things to remember while reconnecting or trying to reconnect, what would you highlight? What would those 3 be?
Consistency, asking good, open-ended, powerful questions, and following up. So do as you say you're going to do. And I think of this especially for CPAs. If you're dealing with clients, whether those are external or they're internal, that when you're reaching out to them or your other people in your network, referral sources, prospective clients, that you reach out to them in a consistent manner, meaning, and I don't mean weekly or even monthly, but maybe for some people it's quarterly. For some people it might be twice a year is sufficient, but have that consistency. So put that into whatever system you use. So you consistently do it. And as we've talked about, Scott, in that genuine way. And you're reaching out to them with a mindset of connection, not of sales. You're connecting with them. You're adding value because you're asking them questions. You're listening. You may ask a question. Hey, what can I help you with these days? What are you struggling with? Who could I introduce you to? That's really powerful. Those are those open-ended questions that we've been talking about. And then the follow-up, do as you say you're going to do. Too often I hear from people, I connected this person, we had a great conversation, and then I never heard from her. She said she was going to do X, Y, and Z, and she never did. At the same time, I hear from people who are so impressed when they meet with someone, when we were able to meet at a conference or, a CPE or something, and they come back to their office and that person has already sent them what they said they were going to send them. So it's an easy way to impress people. Just do what you say you're going to do. So I like to follow the 24-hour rule. If I go to a conference, when the conference ends, I have a list of all the things that I'm going to send to people or follow up. Nice to meet you. Let's set up a time to speak or have coffee. And I try to do that. If I'm flying somewhere, I'll do it on the plane ride home. So then it's just done. And it's just an easy way to keep those connections going in a genuine manner that's really effective.
Okay. No, that makes total sense. And I think you're right. It's so important to 10x those 3 things nowadays than ever before.
That's exactly my thought. And we had talked about this timing of September for many people being the start of a new year. Anyone who's had kids, it always feels like a new year. And I think that just carries through. Even like you, Scott, your kids are out of the house, but it still feels like the start of a new year. But this is a great time if you haven't been doing it because you've been overwhelmed with everything that's going on. This is a great time to sit down, make a list of people who just come to top of mind. Who are people I haven't spoken to in a while? Who are great people I really enjoy talking to? Or who are people who are really well connected in our community? I'm just going to reach out to them and see how they're doing. I mean, this is the silver lining of COVID. It's such an easy topic to bring up to people. What's going on at work? What's going on with the family? This is a great time to reconnect with people and not just think about it from as we talked about clients or customers, but think about people internally that maybe you're not seeing as much and you're not talking to because you're not working on the same project or engagement right now. And you're just reaching out. I mean, I have some people who will say, let's just catch up for 20 minutes. Don't feel this needs to be like an hour-long thing. It could be 15 minutes. It could be 30 minutes. And that's that.
Oh, yeah. I agree. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this should apply to not just business. I mean, your business world, it should apply to everybody, your personal client. I mean, I keep in touch with the kid's first grade teacher because he is in their memory. I mean, he as the best teacher. So we'll periodically call and we'll chat for a few minutes or text here and there, but there's nothing except, hey, I just want to connect. I mean, I think if you get in that mindset overall, it will start to be a habit, and you don't even have to think about it, where it will be foreign.
Exactly. So one of my clients, I love, he does this. He's an experienced guy. So he says, I just go through my Rolodex, which is really his outlook. He'll just pick a letter of the alphabet. So on Monday, he'll say, okay, this week it's going to be the letter H. And he'll just go through and, I haven't talked to Scott in a while. I'm going to pick up the phone and give him a call. So there are some systems you could put into place. I have another client who, anytime someone comes to mind, he just jots down that person's name. He has a list, like a running list, a yellow notepad on the side of his desk. And it's not necessarily he's going to do it in that moment, but it's just a list that someone came to mind. And sometimes he says he just, sends a text or an email and said, hey, I was thinking of you. How are things going? And hope you're well. So it can be really simple. And as long as it's genuine, as we've said so much already, it's really impactful.
Okay. No, this has all been fantastic. There's two more questions I have for you, and then I think we should probably wrap it up. So every guest that we have here, your job is to put messages on T-shirts. If you only had one T-shirt, one design, what would that saying be on that T?
Oh, wow. I would say what came to mind immediately was be real. And so maybe it's something like connect and be real, something along those lines. I'll bring the marketing people in to finesse it.
That's awesome. And if any of the listeners out there like me, which I'm sure they are, they're going to want to know, can they get more information? Can they get like a white paper or an ebook, or are there ways for them to connect with you to take the first steps if they feel like they need some help and need you to help them align with their goals?
Sure. So the easiest way is to go to my website, it's just julieholunga.com, and also connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to hear from people who listen and what sort of their aha or realizations were, or maybe something they've tried. I love hearing that. I learn as much as I do from my reading and research as I do from my clients. So I'm always
We'll ask those folks that reach out to you on LinkedIn that in the message they have to provide an aha moment.
That would be awesome.
Julie, thank you again for joining us today. I forgot to mention earlier that this is the second time Julie has joined us, and I hope you'll come back and join us again. Maybe we'll get you on maybe a monthly circuit, perhaps.
Thank you, Scott. This has been a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Let me know when the TEDx occurs so we can let our listeners, we can send that link out to our listeners if they'd like to see that. We'll include more info and links to the resources that we talked about and put them all in the show notes to this episode. Just click on this episode's info icon in the podcast app on your smartphone or tablet, or open the episode in your computer's web browser. You'll find everything right there. There's also gobeyonddisruption.com, which is where you'll find links to our previous shows, as well as more information about other learning content on this topic on the AICPA and CIMA websites. They always have a useful mix of free and paid for resources, so please have a browse. From our AICPA office in Durham, North Carolina, I'm Scott Kellam. We'll be back soon with more conversations to help you and your profession to go beyond disruption. Till next time, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Disruption, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Learn more about today's topic at AICPA-CIMA.com/disruption. This podcast is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants or any of its subsidiaries or affiliates. It is provided with the understanding that the association, its affiliates, and subsidiaries are not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The association, its subsidiaries, and affiliates make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to and assume no responsibility for the content or application of the material contained herein and expressly disclaim all liability for such damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material.